Welcome to the Catalyst for Growth podcast, a place where we talk about everything under the sun regarding the journey of the professional salesperson. Welcome the host of the C4G Sales Success podcast, John Kailunas II. Take it away, big guy.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We're here in the Vegas Content Studio with Bill Best. We're going to introduce everybody to Bill in a second. This podcast is dedicated to advisors getting better each and every day. You can get all of our materials on our website, Catalyst4, that's number 4, growth.org. We want this to be a resource to use our experiences of the people that we bring in that are industry thought leaders and movers and shakers, people that have had a success in the field and are going to have future success by being affiliated with people like yourself. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Bill. Bill and I, how long have we known each other, Bill?
About 14 years.
All right, so the first two, we met at a YPO function, right?
We met,
and you got to correct me because your memory's a hell of a lot better than mine.
We met at a deal-making session.
And that was, we went and had a drink at, was it Shaw Stone Crab?
That's right.
See, I do remember some. I remember the bars, Bill. I remember the bars. So
it was very crowded.
Bill had mentioned, saw what we were looking for, had vast industry experience, and I'll let him explain that. But it was that point in time, I knew that I had created sort of a monster with Regal, that we were growing, but that we had a lot of internal infrastructure problems, and we were a sales and marketing organization, not a real business. So I was looking for somebody that had a business acumen and could put the back of the house together, and ran across Bill. Couldn't afford Bill, still can't afford Bill, but we worked out a consulting agreement for 2 years.
Yeah. And
Bill would come into Chicago. I'd come. He's a proud Canadian. I'd go into Toronto to visit him, and back and forth for about 2 years, and then he came on full time, and he really has changed Regal from being. And it's what I implore all of you listening. I don't care if you're a one-man shop or you're a 250-man shop. Running your business is real important, and that's what we're going to dedicate this whole episode to. So, Bill, tell everybody a little bit about your background.
So I'm not going to go back and give you a detailed blow-by-blow over 45 years, but I've been blessed with having a very interesting and rich career, basically leaping in sort of 5-year chunks in the early part through personal connections. And I've done everything from real estate development to being in the investment management business for over 30 years. I've done mining in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is a little bit of an eye-opener.
Yeah, we don't have time. Well, maybe we'll have time to talk about those. Are some crazy stories. Bill in the Congo. You made 22 trips or 23 trips?
22 extended trips to the Congo. And I spent 5 years running the largest law firm in Canada at basically 750 law partners, which is a little bit like working for 750 popes. It was an interesting experience.
Why do you got to pick on us Catholics?
But it was, the interesting thing about that was that it taught me one of the great lessons in life. Never have an original idea. Always make your idea somebody else's, and then stuff will get done. So,
tell us a little bit about your education background. You're a CPA, you're a CA, you're also a certified board.
Yeah. So I harken back. I have a bachelor's degree from the University of Toronto, but fast realizing that I was going to go nowhere in life with simply a bachelor's degree, I actually got my CA, which is now called a CPA. Canadians, in their infinite wisdom and propriety, are now chartered professional accountants, as opposed to American certified public accountants. And so I earned my CA back in 1985. Really tough road. I was part of a year that if you wrote both the provincial in Canada and the federal exams, about 20% passed. So it was a tough road to get through. In later life, I enjoy doing some board work, and I recognize that the skill set when you move from management and leadership into board work is quite different. So I've actually invested in taking certifications in board governance, covering ESG, covering climate and biodiversity, as well as an extensive amount of board governance. And in addition to that, given the changing world, I've also taken a certification from MIT in AI. So it's a lifelong journey of learning, and that's what's made being in business for so many years, so exciting and so satisfying.
So from the outside, tell us a little bit about what you did in the financial services, real brief with consolidating, and how you saw these deals come to place and how you put this all together and sold it.
So I've often talked in the Canadian marketplace, it seems to be in a lot of respects from a regulatory and from a business development point of view, literally about 2 decades ahead in Canada. And that comes from the fact that the Canadian banks are so large and so dominant in the market that back in the late 90s, the banks became very threatening to the independent advisor. I happened to be with a firm that I had recently been made the COO of and then subsequently was made the CEO of, called the Equion Group. We were an independent, the Canadian version of an RABD. And we merged with a company called Loring Ward. Many of you may know of Loring Ward in the U.S. for their money management. They were our original partners in Canada. Loring Ward was based in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Equion was based in Toronto, Ontario. And over the course of about 3 years, we made 13 acquisitions in Canada in the independent space. And we basically transformed the industry and became the industry consolidator. At one time, I was at the top of the food chain in 5 different distributors at the same time. And I only mention that because it happened to be 2000, crossing over Y2K. And the Canadian regulatory environment required the officer in charge of the firm to sign personally for liability on Y2K. So it was a bit of a tense time that became probably one of the greatest letdowns on January 1st after midnight.
Did you have a cold beverage afterwards?
No, I actually had my kids with me. They were quite young at the time. We had been to a formal New Year's party, and I took the kids down to the 5 different offices that happened to be in Toronto that night at midnight to do a tour and to share a basket of cheer with each of the teams that had slept over in the various boardrooms in anticipation, and then seeing us through Y2K. So it was pretty heady times.
I would love to get your children's opinion on that.
My girls, I have 3 daughters. They're all now
you got one in Australia, one in Chicago, and one in Toronto.
Right. And the 36, 34, and 32, all mercifully now off the payroll. But it's funny because they never knew what Dad did. And people would ask them, well, what's your dad do? And they said he would have meetings and talk loudly on the phone at people.
Well, you know what? They got your daughters. That's what you still do now. You still do that now for Regal. Let's talk about when you came into Regal. I one of the things I respected is you interviewed everybody in the company.
Yeah,
you sat down, and when you came in and saw that culture, you realized it was a strong culture, but that there was a lot of things your resources, your talents could fix.
Yeah, the challenge when I first came into Regal was that because it had been a sales organization, because it had been run as a sales organization, and really the operational side was an afterthought. And that's not a criticism, because
even if it was, it'd be fair.
Because in many organizations, while we're in business to sell and to serve clients, we do have to have a strong backbone. And one of the challenges was that we weren't necessarily the employees weren't necessarily right-sized and had the skill sets for their jobs. And it took a while to really bring in a good team. And the real proof of the pudding is in the eating. Now we have a regular circulation of work anniversaries, and we have young people who are now not quite so young, and they've been with us 6, 7, now 8 years.
Yeah, some people now have children. They can't go single. They've gotten married. They've got kids. Some have gone on and gotten their MBAs during that process. Yep. And we're proud of all those people. They've grown with the firm.
Yeah, they've grown with the firm, and we've encouraged them, and we've actually funded their MBAs and other training, because really the strength of the company is the strength of the team below you. And the one thing that I'm particularly gratified now is that we have a strong team underneath and a strong team that I can count on. So as I now begin to shift my priorities in what I'm doing day to day within the business, I can with confidence and good conscience leave a lot of the decision making at a day to day level to the team, because we don't let them make the final decisions on the farm type things, but they're more than capable of making the day to day decisions. And it's that trust that I believe you show in people that creates more and more confidence in them to do a better and better job.
In your career, have you seen anybody that runs both sides of the house, a single person that runs both sides of the house really well?
To be honest, no.
I remember a conversation. I don't know if you remember this. You asked to see our reporting, and all I had was sales reports to give to you. I had no other reports, and you're like, well, how do you make a decision? And my famous answer is by instinct.
Yeah.
And he goes, we got to get away from that instinct decision making.
At the end
but if you're a single rep listening to this right now, you don't build out any infrastructure. You're worrying, you got money coming in, you pay your expenses, and you keep what's left. And that's a sort of eat what you kill mentality.
Right.
And we were still on that, and we were doing millions of dollars of business.
But I think what people miss by not sort of delving into the numbers, and I'm not so overwhelmed that you make the decisions entirely made by numbers. At the end of the day, you have to weigh factors that are both quantitative and qualitative. The interesting thing is that I learned really early in my career from some pretty good mentors that you had to look for the correlations and the interdependencies between numbers. And if we simply look at say a sales number, and we look at a number of balance at the end of a year, and the balance may be up and the sales may be up, but could they have been up better? What are you retaining? And when you start to delve into the numbers, and one of the big things that we'll talk about today is AUM, that'll be our versus AUA. You don't know. You don't know if you're just looking at a gross number.
Well, you know what number I look at all the time now that you've been in my life? Margin.
Well,
I look at margin numbers.
Yeah, and
that gets us into the AUM, AUA.
Yeah, the margin aspect is probably the most revealing in our business, because when you look at a margin as more of a platform provider than say a rep who's retaining most of it, we're only retaining about 9% of the top line revenue that we bring in. And that margin, a small tweak in that margin from say 9 to 9.5 makes all the difference in the world. And if we only look at the gross number, we miss opportunities and we miss reality.
Let me get back to your AUM, AUA. Which is so important. Reps look at total sales, right? They're total. If you're a hybrid rep, $1 million on the broker-dealer side isn't worth what $1 million is on the RIA side. And the reason is the sale of the business. And most advisors, they'll look at their book and say, I've got 50 million under AUM, AUA. But if it's only 10, 15 million in AUM, that book isn't as valuable. And we do a lot of valuation. I shouldn't say we, you do a lot of evaluations for advisors. And let's just talk about the one as an example that you just did. Yeah. We'll leave the gentleman's name out to